Hi, my name is Billy McCarthy. I'm the new Food Safety Project Manager at National Farmers Union, working closely with Catherine and the rest of the team at NFU based out of DC to try to promote and enhance all things food safety across the country. And just a small bit about me, my wife and I also own and operate a small diversified farm in Northern Maryland. So I'm here not just with my NFU hat on, but I'm also really excited to learn some more from Sergio about food safety best practices and GAP stuff. So I'm going to just share a few housekeeping notes for everyone, and then I'll turn it over to Sergio. Here we are. So as you know, we're looking at GAP 101. Uh-oh. Can you see images inside that?
No, it's blank.
It's blank. Okay,
use our imaginations.
We'll use our imaginations. It's just asking for all of us, mute yourselves with the Zoom mute button while you're not speaking. There's also the chat and raise your hand options, but that's just to keep the chatter down and let us focus on what's being presented at the time. I don't know where my image file went to. Oh, there it is. Okay, it was just set on a slide. So yeah, you can go off video for privacy or just your personal preference. And if you want to rename yourself, I just did that to make sure that my organizational affiliation and pronouns are in there. You're welcome to do that as well. We have that feature turned on just so you can let folks know, what farm or organization or group that you're coming from or any other info you want to know in your chat name. And then, yeah, you can chat to the whole group or chat to one of us directly if you have a specific question you want an issue addressed while the workshop is going on. So I already said this part, we're going to record again for educational and record keeping purposes. And just a really quick bit about the National Farmers Union. We're a grassroots producer-driven organization that believes in strong family agriculture, and that's the basis for thriving rural life in all of our communities. We have official state chapters in all of the states in dark green, and you can also join as at-large national member in states in the light green. For instance, I, as a farmer in Maryland, am a national at-large member. But it is really a membership-driven organization. It's very inclusive and democratic. And if you have any other questions about Farmers Union stuff, Catherine and I are going to drop some links both to the food safety work and just the National Farmers Union website in the chat for all of you to take a look at. Although I know that some of you are here from state chapters or affiliated with state chapters. So great to see Farmer Union brethren. And just, a little more detail about the broader food safety work that we're doing. We work through the local food safety collaborative, which is housed out of the FDA, and the food safety outreach program, which is specifically sponsoring today's workshop through the USDA. We've been working on those projects for many years and trying to see the best ways to get the most information and the most practical support out to farmers that want to enhance their food safety practices. So we do that through outreach, education, and training to small fruit vegetable growers. And there's big focus on FSMA, but a lot of farms are not necessarily covered by that rule. But there are other things like getting a GAP audit or working with specific, say, institutional buyers or circumstances where you're going to want to have really good safety practices and record keeping. So we're trying to provide a whole spectrum of resources on food safety stuff. And we're working with a network of partner organizations across the country, extension, universities, farmer union, state chapters, other food and farming or community-based nonprofits. And all of us are trying in different ways to implement that project and get the information and the resources out there on food safety. So that is it from me. And if you have any questions, again, just chat directly to me or Catherine.
One final thing too, before we pass the mic over to Sergio, all of the resources from today, there is, if you go to our local food safety website, we already have the GAP audit resources and SOP templates on a website that Food Safety CTS partnered with us to create. And we will be posting the recordings on YouTube that you could look at later and share it with all of the people you think could be benefiting from it. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Sergio.
Thanks, Catherine. And yeah, welcome, Sergio. We're really excited to
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing okay. It's a lovely Monday. My name is Sergio Nieto Montenegro, and I'm gonna be teaching the workshop today. I work for a company called Food Safety CTS, Food Safety Consulting and Training Solutions. And the main goal of our organization is to translate science and technology into everyone's language. And through that, we develop many different training materials for different industries. We have worked with the mushroom industry in Pennsylvania, with the American Mushroom Institute, with the California and Arizona LGMA, the Leafy Greens Marketing Agreement, with the National Mango Board, with the avocado industry, with the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service, with Cornell University, with Penn State University. I'm a Penn State grad, so I spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania, and many other different organizations. We like to create things that people, we believe in the extension model that the land-grant universities use. So we like to create things that can help others to build capacities, or we like to help build capacities. And with that, today I'm gonna be first sharing my screen. You can see my screen, correct? Okay, I'm gonna be talking about the USDA Good Agricultural Practices, Good Handling Practices, Audit Verification Checklist. But before that, I would like to know who's in the audience, so I can know how can I customize this talk. So let's do a quick introduction. I don't know, how do you feel more comfortable typing it in the chat, or if you want to open the mic? It's totally up to you. So what's better for you? Maybe do a type in the chat. So if you can write your name, the farm that you work for, or that you own, and the type of products that you grow. And if you are familiar with the USDA-GAP program. Again, this information will allow me to customize today's training. Okay, nice. Many different vegetables. Thank you very much, Tommy. Okay, thank you very much, Carol. In New Mexico. We are based in El Paso, Texas, and also in Chihuahua, Mexico. And from there, we go all over the Americas. Billy McCarthy Mixed Produce, okay, CSA Distribution, Kentucky Horticulture Council. We provide support to fruits and vegetable farmers in Kentucky. We have a GAP Audit co-share program, as well as some other food safety educational projects. Now, it's nice to hear from you, Danny. Several states have a GAP Audit cost share. When I was in Pennsylvania, I was part of the group that developed the Mushroom Good Agricultural Practices Program, or MGAP. And they have a very nice cost-sharing program with the state of Pennsylvania. And most importantly, this audit is the first step towards a certification. It is a very basic audit. I like it a lot because and I think the way that we set it up, it's going to make the life of the farmers and growers easier. Gary, Josie Porter Farm, Diversified Vegetable Farm with CSA and Farmer-Led Food Hub. Also a PSA trainer. Okay, let's see, Bethany Cox from Kentucky Horticulture Council to help our farmers with any questions they have about GAP auditing. Okay, then we have Anna. Yeah, starting in 2000, but want to expand to animal products preserves, not familiar with GAP auditing. Okay, good. So we have a nice mixed up. Hopefully, the tools that we developed help many of you. So let me start by saying we won't be here for 4.5 hours. It will take us less than that. And I also would like that if you have a question, you can just open the microphone at any moment and interrupt me. I want to learn from you, and I want each of us to learn from each other and tell us the stories, tell us your experiences. I don't want to be like talking to my computer like for 2 to 3 hours. So I think this is a great opportunity to collaborate and ask questions. So with all that said, I'm gonna start that how did this start, like this project? How did this project start? We were contacted by the National Farmers Union through some like people who we have done work with. We are, as I say, we have developed many different training programs for many different like commodities in many different countries. So they wanted, or the objectives of this grant was to translate the USDA-GAP audit verification checklist to Spanish. So we have, or the main goal of the project was to translate these audits into Spanish. But then I was like, just like thinking, and I say, okay, but if we want to really outreach growers and not only Spanish speaking growers, we need to go a step further on this. So we developed model SOPs, like standard operating procedures and record keeping templates that are compatible with the USDA-GAP program in Spanish. But since like everything that we are asked to do in Spanish needs to be done in English too. So we say, okay, so let's do the project in both languages. Because we need to have it in English for its approval and for the interest, like so we can outreach more growers. And then the other objective of the project was to develop a training program to teach the content of the USDA-GAP program. So we had 3 main things: translate the audit into Spanish, and then we added that we were gonna develop like model SOPs and record keeping templates that are compatible with the USDA-GAP program. Let me tell you why did I come up with that idea. One of the things that growers hate, it's paperwork. One of the things that especially like small growers, they are really good, like farmers, growers, they keep feeding us. But when we get to the, okay, you need an SOP, you need a document for this. It's like, so, and how do I do that? 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 So I thought that we were gonna address a big need by creating the templates. And then we needed to do some outreach. So we put together this training program, and I can share this presentation. I can share this presentation with you. And this recording is gonna be posted on the website. And I'm gonna show you a couple of websites where you can get all this information. Yes, Carol says, lol, paperwork, it's a definite challenge. So we are trying to address that challenge. So another objective of the program was to deliver remote training to the target audience of small-scale growers and develop technical assistance to the growers who attended the trainings and are implementing procedures in their operations. So we even, for the people in Kentucky and in other states who are supporting growers, we created an email where we can address your questions about the program. So after this workshop is done, and if you have questions, feel free to reach to us so we can address some of the questions that you might have. That's part of the project. And this is the food safety grant that made this possible. So thank you very much to the National Farmers Union for having me and for having my team conducting this project. Okay, so let's get started. Let's get started with some background. So the USDA Good Agricultural Practices and Good Handling Practices Audit Verification Program, it's a program based on a guide that the FDA published a while ago, I think more than 10 years ago. It's the guide to minimize the microbial food safety hazards for fresh fruits and vegetables. So that is the foundation of this program. This program, the USDA-GAP and GHP Audit Verification Program, it's offered to the fruit and vegetable industry, and it evaluates an operation efforts to minimize the risk of contamination of fresh fruits and vegetables and nuts by microbial pathogens. So it is a verification program to make sure that you are following good agricultural practices. One thing that it's important to learn is that this is an entry-level program. This is probably the most basic good agricultural practices and good handling practices out there. Now, we live in a world where there are many different verifications, such as Global GAP, Primus GFS, the USDA-GAP Plus, the Produce Safety Rule, which is not a standard, which is not a private standard. It's the regulation, the FDA's regulation, but this is an entry-level program. And there's another thing that is really important on this program. It's voluntary, and it's a user fee funded program. That means that you gotta pay for it. You gotta pay to have that audit. The good news is that many different states have a cost sharing programs that can help alleviate the burden of an audit. So here you have the website that you can visit to get more information about the program. But we will cover a lot of the information that it's on the website. Okay, another thing that it's important, it's this table here. I'm pretty sure, and I want a yes or no answer. How many of you are familiar with the produce safety rule, with the FSMA produce safety rule? Or let me reword this question. Are you familiar with the FDA produce safety rule? Yes or no? Yes, okay. No, yes. Okay, the FISMA product safety rule is the first mandatory standard for growing, harvesting, packing, and storing produce. That's, I just say the word mandatory, that it's a program that it's looking into prevent the contamination of fresh produce. And I'm not gonna get into the details of that. There are some exemptions. For instance, if you're a farm that sells less than $25,000 per year, and these are 2011 dollars, and it's not like per year, it's during it's the average of the previous 3 years, you might get an exemption for this. But if you conduct activities that fall under the farm definition, and then if you grow produce that is covered by the rule, you are subject to the FISMA produce safety rule, which are the standards for growing, packing, and storing produce. And that's mandatory. And I'm not gonna get into more details of that. And then we also have the USDA-GAP audit, which is the one that we're gonna talk here. This is the one that pertains to us. And then we have another program by the USDA, which is the USDA-GAP Plus. And what is the difference between these three? Are farms required to participate? For the USDA-GAP Plus and the USDA-GAP program, the one that we're gonna be covering here, no, this is not mandatory, it's voluntary. For the produce safety rule, for a produce safety rule inspection, yes, inspections are mandatory for any cover farm or operation that grows, harvests, and packs covered produce under the rule. And then there are many exemptions that you might get depending on the size of your farm and on the type of product that you grow. However, all of this is covered under the Produce Safety Alliance Growers Training. So I'm just gonna mention here the differences. The thing that I gotta learn is that the USDA-GAP audit is not mandatory. But if you're a covered farm by the Produce Safety Rule, that is mandatory. Who's the governing authority for the Produce Safety Rule, like inspection, is FDA and or the state. A lot of the states have agreements with the FDA to conduct inspections. And for these two audits is the USDA. Is farm registration required for a program? No, it's not. Who performs the service for the audit or the inspection? In the case of the produce safety rule, it can be the state or an FDA inspector. For the audit that we're gonna cover here, it's a USDA auditor or a USDA licensed state auditor. Is there a fee or cost for the service? Not for the produce safety rule. Yes, for the USDA GAP program. What is the frequency for the produce safety rule? It varies. But for the program, the USDA GAP audit, there's an initial annual audit. And your operation may be subject to an unannounced visit, depending on your growing season and depending on other factors. Okay, what is the final outcome or determination? If you get an inspection, you're gonna be told that you're in compliance or not in compliance. And that's the case for the produce safety rule. Remember that if you fall under the produce safety rule, that is mandatory. For this program, the final outcome is that you meet or do not meet the program. And you meet the program when you have a minimum of 80% of the points in your audit. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this later during the program. So in other words, you will get a pass. You need to pass the audit with an 80% to get the meat. But you also, there are a couple of automatic and satisfactory that you might get that would prevent you to pass the audit, and we will cover that. And this is a document that was produced by AFDO. And this is really important for the growers because there's a lot of confusion out there because there are too many different audits. Is a documented food safety plan required? No. For the produce safety rule, for the FSMA inspections, you don't need to have a written food safety plan. You do need to have some records. And again, you can learn more about this program in the PSA growers training. For the USDA-GAP audit, yes, you need to have a documented and implemented food safety plan. If you don't have a food safety plan, a written food safety plan, you cannot have an audit. Is a traceability or recall plan required for this audit? Yes. For the product safety rule inspection? No. And don't ask me why. That's a topic for another time. The new traceability rule for certain products, it's gonna get published next month. Are there requirements for pre-harvest water testing on farms? Well, the product safety rule subpart E, which is the subpart that covers the water, is being finalized. Yes, in this, for the purpose of this audit, yes. And who's gonna tell you how often? Well, you need to do a risk assessment. But at a minimum, here's the frequency of the water tests. And then the last question is periodic commodity sampling, that means product testing, or environmental sampling required? No, no. The only exception in the product safety rule are sprouts, but overall, no, you don't need to test product in any of these like audits or inspections or regulatory inspections. Any questions? I like this table a lot because for a grower, can be very difficult to know the difference between what is a FSMA PSR inspection, this basic program, which is the USDA-GAP program, and the USDA Harmonized GAP Plus audit. The USDA Harmonized GAP Plus audit is an audit based on the United Fresh, well, not United Fresh, like IFPA International Fresh Produce Association Produce Harmonized GAP program, with some additions that were benchmarked with the GFSI. And I'm not gonna get into more details on that, but it's a very nice audit that that some buyers are accepting. Okay, again, the USDA-GAP audit is an entry-level audit. I don't know if there are any questions, any comments or questions. No? Okay. Okay. So general information about the USDA-GAP audit includes that all the auditors used to perform the USDA-GAP or good handling practices audit are either federal employees or State Department of Agriculture employees. And they have been trained to conduct this audit. They are trained auditors. I already mentioned that we need to have a food safety plan in place, a written food safety plan in place. So let me ask you a question, and I want you to either open the microphone or type it in the chat. This is a very basic question. What is a food safety program? What is a food safety program? Anyone on the chat? I'm waiting. Yes. Oh, that's a very nice definition. Having best practices in place to mitigate risks during production and harvest. I like that definition a lot. Anyone else? I like to say, like in plain English, with an accent though. In plain English, a food safety program is a set of policies and procedures that I have in place in my farm to minimize the risk of produce contamination. And then the food safety plan is a written document that covers all aspects of the growing and handling processes and evaluates the potential sources of risks. This written plan indicates what steps and procedures the operation will take to reduce the risk of contamination by chemical, physical, or biological hazards. The heart or the core of a food safety plan are my policies, my SOPs, or standard operating procedures, my policies, standard operating procedures, and my records. That's the core of my program. So a policy or a procedure or an SOP and a standard operating procedure, it's a document that it's gonna tell me what's gonna get done, who's gonna get it done, how often it's gonna get done, who does what by when, and how much. And then some policies or procedures or a standard operating procedure is gonna call for some records. So in my food safety program, I'm gonna have some standard operating procedures. We also know them as SOPs. And then some of those procedures are gonna call for some records. And those procedures are going to outline what Carol told us, like the best practices. So for instance, in my farm, I might have, let's say, we are a very small farm. We have only 5 employees or 3 employees. So, and I know that before harvesting, everyone needs to wash their hands. They need to perform a hand washing procedure. And I just do that. But for the purpose of the audit, you might need to have a standard operating procedure on hand washing. So in that standard operating procedure, you're gonna have, what are you gonna do? Okay, I'm just gonna say Sergio's farm. Sergio's farm, all employees are gonna wash their hands before start working, after each break, and after using the restroom. And anytime that hands may become contaminated. They are gonna wash their hands following this procedure. And I'm gonna have a portable restroom, or I'm gonna use the restroom that is on the farm. So that would be my procedure. It's a document that anyone can look and they know what they have to do. And then in that procedure, I can also describe all the type of facilities that I'm going to have. And I might need to have a record to make sure, or a checklist to make sure that the people who is at the farm records that everything in the restroom is operating in a proper manner. So my food safety program, or the core of my food safety plan, are the SOPs, which is a document that tells you what are you gonna do, who's gonna do it, when, and by how much. And you can have many different standard operating procedures for many different best practices. And some of these procedures are gonna have some records. Some others, no record might be needed. But it's a document where you're gonna write, how do you do things? And believe it or not, this is something that scares some growers. So we developed some model SOPs that you can share with the people. So there are many resources available to build a food safety program. If you want to have a USDA audit and you're gonna get started and getting prepared to have a USDA-GAP audit, you must have a food safety program in place. Another thing that it's important to have, but it's not mandatory in the audit, it's to have an internal audit. You might need to have a written food safety program, and you might need to do an internal audit to make sure that you have all the documents that are required in the USDA-GAP program. Any questions, any thoughts on this? What is the biggest challenge that you see when working with growers, or for you as a grower to have a food safety program in place, a written food safety program? If you can type that on the chat, would be good. Why is this so difficult? I'm waiting for some answers. What are some of the challenges that growers have for implementing a written food safety plan, or for having a food safety plan, a written food safety plan? Okay. Anyone else? Yes, so we need to provide tools to the growers so they can have a capacity of the owners, managers to have a plan on file, staff time to be trained on the plan. Yes. Hopefully this recording can help some of the audiences some of your stakeholders. But believe it or not, the challenges that you have are not much different to the challenges across the different states within the United States. And then if we cross the borders, they have the very same challenges. Like not everyone is comfortable with a computer, not enough staff, unless you're a big farm. But when you are a medium, small, or very small grower, this becomes a challenge. Okay, there are several types of documents that we miss this. This is like we have a mistake in this slide. This is in Spanish because we grabbed this. We did it first in Spanish and then translated into English. But let me tell you, there are 3 types of documents that this audit requires. A D indicates that you need to show a document to demonstrate compliance. A document can be a combination of an SOP describing your company's policy, or a record that helps you to prove that an activity took place. If you find an R in the audit, this indicates that a record is required to be kept showing that an action was taken. And a P indicates that a policy or a standard operating procedures must be documented in the food safety plan in order to show conformance to the question. If no document is required according to the checklist, the auditor will visually evaluate the requirement. So let me let me show you the audit. So you can see this. Where's my Zoom? My Zoom's here. So here you have the audit. And then the D indicates that a document is required to show conformance with the question. An R indicates that a record is required. And a P indicates that a policy or a standard operating procedure must be documented in the food safety plan. So the audit or verification checklist, it's a checklist. So when you request an audit, the auditor is gonna go to your farm with a checklist to check that you have whatever is included in that checklist. That is in very plain English. So you're gonna have several questions in different sections, and I'm gonna get into that in a little bit. So, and they are gonna start like asking you the questions. You're gonna get some points deducted from the total if you don't have them, if you don't have a document, or if you are not performing that activity. There are some stuff like in the audit that might not apply to you. So the auditor might write down and not applicable, and that wouldn't count in the total score for your audits. I'm gonna get back to that in a little bit. But as you can tell, here they require documentation, a policy. This can be an SOP. This can be a records. For instance, all employees and all visitors to the location are required to follow proper sanitation and hygiene practices. There's a policy here. That means that you need to have a policy or a standard operating procedure. Does that make sense? It's pretty simple and straightforward. We're gonna go question by question, and I'm gonna be describing what we have. Okay, here are, depending on the state where you are, you can request an audit. There's this website where you can get information about requesting an audit. So the actual audit is broken down in 4 main areas. The opening meeting. After you have requested an audit and you have prepared for your audit, and it's the auditing date, the audit date, what's going to happen is that the auditor is going to get to your farm, and you're going to have an opening meeting with him. And then he's gonna tell you what this is about. He's gonna answer any questions or concerns that you might have. He's gonna go over what he's gonna do during the course of the day. If he wants to go and walk the farm or review the paperwork first, he's gonna tell you that during the opening meeting. Again, he's gonna answer all the questions you might have. The second step is conducting the audit. This is the actual audit. Then when you have several auditors, they do a team caucus or a meeting among them. This doesn't really happen a lot. You generally get the audit conducted by one auditor. And then you're gonna have a closing meeting. And this is where the auditor gives you the main or the findings. There are different types of audits. You can find more information about this on the user's guide. You can request an audit. And remember, this is voluntary. It's a voluntary program. You might request an audit and have an initial audit. You might have a follow-up audit. And this is done when the requirements are not met. However, if you decide to go ahead and schedule an audit, it is very important for you to get prepared for this. Get prepared for the audits. And you might have an unannounced verification visit. at the end of the audit, you're gonna get a nonconformity and corrective action report. You might want to work on some of this. Some of these might be short-term, some of these might be long-term. And during the next audit, this will get reviewed. Okay, the audit scopes. The USDA Good Agricultural Practices or Good Handling Practices audit is divided into 7 sections. The first section is the general questions. And this is something that everyone's gonna have to do. The second part of the audit is the farm review, or part 1 is farm review. Part 2, it's field harvesting and field packing activities. This is the GAP program. When you get an audit of these 3. So that's the GAP audit. If you do part 3, that's a GHP audit, good handling practices, or part 4. But regardless, if you do part 3 or part 4, you're always going to have to do or to do the first section of the audit, which is the general sections, the general questions section. So let's take a look at each one. In the general section, in the general questions audit section of the audit, you're gonna find questions related to the implementation of your food safety program, your traceability and recall program, worker health and hygiene. And remember, regardless of the scope of the audit that you want to do in your farm or facility, you're gonna have to undergo the general questions. So you're gonna do kind of, it's not called part 0, but you're gonna have to do the general questions plus some other different sections of the audits. This is mandatory. This is a mandatory scope of every audit. In the part 1, the farm review, the auditor is going to be reviewing your water usage, sewage treatment, animals, wildlife and stock and livestock, animal-based soil amendments and municipal biosolids, soils, traceability. This is something that you're going to get reviewed if you are going to do a farm review, if you choose to do that scope of the audit. Part number 2, field harvest and field packing activities, field sanitation and hygiene, field harvesting and transportation. Then the part 3 is the packing house. For the packing house, the auditor is gonna be looking at receiving, washing packing line, packing house worker health and hygiene, packing house, general housekeeping, pest control, and traceability. So some farms, if you're a farm and have no packing house, you might not be doing this. But if you're a farm and you also have a packing house, so you might choose to do the general questions, the farm review, the field harvest and field packing activities, and the house packing facility, like a scope of the audits, scopes of the audits. So you would be doing a GAP and a GHP audit, good handling practices. You might be just a cooler, like storage and transportation. So you might be doing the general questions plus the storage and transportation. So it will all depend on your type of farm. Or the scope that you choose depends on the type of farm. This is for wholesale distribution center and terminal warehouses. Here, you're going to be asked questions related to receiving, storage facility and temperature control, pest control, repacking, reconditioning, worker health and personal hygiene, shipping and transportation, and traceability. So you will be doing the general questions and the part 6. And part 7 is optional. And this is about food defense. In food defense, you're going to be measuring, or you're going to get verified on the practices that you have implemented to prevent intentional adulteration of your product. And the different like sections of this like part of the audit include secure employee and visitor procedures, secure facility procedures. There's another section that if you decide that you want to use the logo, you're gonna get or you need to follow some like guidelines on how to use the logo. Any questions all the way to here? This is gonna be better when I get into the website. Questions? You can just type no in the chat so I know that we're together on this. Not right now. Okay, let's go and take a peek at the, and this is really important for the people who are not familiar with the gaps. So this is as I say, this is the most basic program out there. And I like it a lot because it doesn't really ask for things that are I was gonna say things that are crazy. I should use another word, things that are senseless, maybe another word, the things that are very difficult to comply with by a small grower. But don't take me wrong. My favorite word in food safety is risk. So you can have a very complex program or a very like small and simple program that it's going to be taking care of the risks that you might have at the farm. So I think when a grower or a person who is helping the grower to implement the program, when they understand risk and they implement practices to mitigate risks, they have a very nice food safety program. That's a better program than having a bunch of paperwork. So can you take a look at the website? Can you see my screen? Okay, the website, the foodsafetycts.com, GAP-GHP, hosts the different documents that we develop for these grants. I believe the National Farmers Union is redesigning the website, so it might be available at a later time. So here's in Spanish, here's in English. So here you can access to many different documents. So you can access to like some of the instructions for using the templates, a templates list guide, and the USDA-GAP GHP audit verification checklist. Are you guys in a computer and have access to internet? Okay, I'm gonna go back to my PowerPoint. And then I'm gonna come back to this website and I'm gonna be downloading the documents and show you what's on each document. I'm gonna give you a brief overview on what we have developed. And we're getting into the meat of the program. So here's the website. And then we put together a list of documents. We developed, let's say 17 or 18 SOPs, many different SOPs that work for the different programs. 17, 18 model SOPs. There's something really important. These are model SOPs. You need to customize them to match your farm operation. We did a lot of the boots on the ground work, but you still need to modify this. Maybe delete some stuff, maybe add a sentence or two, change a few things here and there. So, and then we added a code to each SOP. And then we develop 21 records. It's not that you're going to have to use them all. It will all depend if you do the general questions in part 1, or the general questions in part 1 and part 2, or the general questions in part 3, or the general questions in part 5. Does that make sense? So here are some of the records that we developed. Some records, you might not use them. For instance, if there's a record about ice handling and ice storage, you might not use that. Okay, we also develop another document with instructions. Instructions for using record and procedure templates. The templates are organized by operation type. Again, at the beginning, we had them like all, and we decided, okay, how can we make this more user-friendly, or how can we make this user-friendlier to the growers? Okay, we're gonna have like 4 or 5 different like buckets. And then in one bucket, we're gonna have all the documents that you need if you're a farm. In the other ones, all the documents that you need if you're just a packing house. In the other bucket, all the documents that you need if you're a cooler. And in another bucket, all the documents that you need if you're on a distribution, if you're a distribution center. Does that make sense? So you're gonna have the general questions and the ones for farm, for the packing house, the storage and distribution, or the distribution center. They can be edited. They were made like in a Word format. And again, this is very important. I should have written this in capital letters. Adapt the templates to your company needs, equipment, tools, and practices. So the risks in the farms in Kentucky are different than the risks of the farms in New Mexico, or the risks that you have in Pennsylvania or in Maryland. Even within states, the risks are different depending on where you are. The risk is different if you're next to, let me say, some of you say that you have animals at the farm. So the risks are different when you have animals in the farm than when your farm is in the middle of nowhere, that you don't have any neighbors. Or if even, like, I'm going to use an example, like think about a place such as Yuma, Arizona. It's like a desert. And then you have the Colorado River. But there are too many different risks there. If you're next to the river, you might have the potential for animal intrusion, that it's walking to the river to drink water. Or if you're in the middle of nowhere, just have the canal, like, or if you are in the middle of the city, like, because there are some farms that are close to urban settings. Does that make sense? So the risks are different. So it is very important to adapt the templates to your company needs, equipment, tools, and practices. Not documents apply to every type of operation. If there's one slide in the whole program that will help you to understand which documents belong to what, is this. So, because in this one, if you're a farm, a packing house, a storage and transportation or distribution center, we check them, check the ones that you need. For instance, if you're a packing house, you don't need the soil amendments SOP, you don't need the field history and assessment, you don't need the pre-harvest assessment document. Does that make sense? And that is the way that we organize the different buckets. That means that in the farm bucket, you're just going to have the documents that are shaded here. In the packing house, the documents that are shaded here. Remember, you still need to adapt it. And I think I have said that like 20 times in less than 2 minutes, because that's the most important part. We want to mitigate the risks, not just having a written food safety program. Okay. Part 7 on preventive food defense measures only applies to companies that must register as a facility with FDA. This section is optional for those companies that need food defense verification. And we included also a food defense plan. And here, this is the SOP for the food defense plan. You might want to get rid of this, or change a little bit, but we did a lot of the legwork. The templates list guide was designed to help you associate each requirement question of the audit to the template that contains the policy, procedure, or record needed to show conformance. We have a food safety plan cover page. This is kind of the cover of the program. And that applies to pretty much where you can just like mark like things that you use. Any questions so far? This document that I'm about to show is really cool. Let's go back to the website. Can you see my screen? Good. Okay, here's everything that I've been like telling you. This is another way that we organized for the farm. Oops, for the farm, these are the documents that you need. Of course, you need the general questions, which are included here for the packing house. Can you tell that you are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you don't have 7, 8, or 9? Right here, 7, 8, or 9, because those documents pertain to soil amendments, history and field assessment, because the packing house is not a farm. So for the storage and transportation, you have the SOPs and then you have the records. For the wholesale distribution center terminal warehouse, here's what you. And then we have this other list, just organized in another different way. So for the SOP 02, which is the traceability and recall, you need 2 types of records. The record 01, traceability exercise log, and the corrective actions log. For the water usage and control SOP, you need these 5 records, or you might need. For the soil amendments, you need a record that are for treatments and the record that is for applications. So it's a list that matches the SOPs with the corresponding records. Remember that a few minutes ago, I mentioned, yes, you need to have an SOP. The SOP means that who does what by when, and then that I say, oh, and by the way, some SOPs may call for a record. Remember that I say that? So in this case, we also organize the SOPs and the record that they call for. And then this is another document that we created, the templates list guide. Remember that D indicates that a document is required to show conformance with the question, and R indicates that a record is required to be kept showing that an action was taken. And then a P indicates that a policy or an SOP must be documented in the plan to show conformance. What we did is that we grabbed the audit, and then we're going to look at the audit in detail. We grabbed the audit And then we added a column to the audit. And then in that column, you can see the record that you need. Is this making sense? It's kind of teach to the test. But remember, what is the most important thing in this training or with this program that we developed? Adapt. You need to adapt the SOPs. This is just a food safety model plan. It's not you can just grab and go. It's something that you still need to put some work. And then let me ask this question. Why is this shaded? How is this going to get verified during the audits? I need a volunteer. How is this, let's say questions G6, G7, G8, G9? How is this going to be verified in the audits by the auditor? Because there's no record. It doesn't say anything about records there. Here, yes, not need for this, not need, a record is not needed. That's the answer. It is shaded, not because the auditor is not going to be looking at it. It is shaded because no record is needed. The audit doesn't call for a record. It's going to be verified visually, like visual officer, like visual verification. Does that make sense? That means that the auditor is going to be walking your farm or your packing house, and then he's just going to be looking at your farm or your facility or your packing house. That's a great document because it can be overwhelming for a grower when they don't when you don't know like what kind of document you should have. And then this is the plain audit verification. In the one in Spanish, and this is the most current. In the one in Spanish, you have the checklist in Spanish. And then here we have like zip files that you can download. You just click. And here you have the records and the SOPs. Oh, another thing that I forgot to explain here. You know that in the SOPs and the records, there's a stuff written in blue. That is where some of the customization is needed. Of course, you need to read them carefully and get rid of the things that you don't do, or modify the narrative in this. But a lot of the work has been done. And again, these are models SOP. Billy, how many times I have said that? Because that's important. We need the grower also to understand that the main goal of this, it's not just to pass an audit. The main goal of this, it's to mitigate risks. And you need to adapt your SOPs, having a plan, and you need to mitigate the risks by applying practices and procedures. And these procedures must be yours. Okay, so what are we gonna do is that I'm gonna be looking at the general questions, and then after I'm done with the general questions, we'll take a break. So the way that this training is structured is that we grab each question of the audit, and then we mention the type of document that you need, and then we show you that document. So for the general questions have 3 subsections, for the lack of a better word: implementation of a food safety program, the traceability, and the worker health and hygiene. And then there are some questions for each of those like parts. So for the implementation of a food safety program, a documented food safety program that incorporates GAPs and or GHP, good handling practices, has been implemented. And then you need to have a document to prove that. And that document is your food safety plan. Remember, there are some questions that if you don't answer the questions, that may result in an unsatisfactory condition. In another audits, they call it an automatic failure. That means that you must have that. You must have that. And this is one of them. So it's kind of a question that it is a question that you must have. Otherwise, not having that will result in an unsatisfactory condition. In other audits, people call them like automatic failure. You cannot pass an audit if you don't have that. So the operation has designated someone to implement and oversee an established food safety program. And the document that helps you to comply with this is the model SOP 01. You need to name a person. For traceability, a documented traceability program has been established. This is another thing that you must have. The operation has performed a mock recall that was proven to be effective. So for this, the audit calls for a document and a record. So we have the traceability record, the traceability and recall program. It's a program that has been like written or pre-written, and it's part of your SOPs. Drinking water is available to all workers. Personal health and hygiene, hand washing, and toilet facilities. The document code for this is SOP number 3, and you need a document for this to demonstrate that drinking water is available to all workers. This part is also really important. There are many different questions in the audit. It's not that we want to create a lot of paperwork for the grower, but what we did is we created an SOP on personal health and hygiene, hand washing, and toilet facilities. So we have one SOP that helps you to have a plan for many different questions in the audit for covering that section. But remember, you need to adapt that SOP. So SOP number 3, in SOP number 3, you're gonna be stating that you provide drinking water to all employees. Sergio's Farm provides drinking potable water to all employees. All the employees and visitors who come to Sergio's Farms are required to follow proper sanitation and hygiene practices. All my employees are trained in food safety. All of that is in SOP 03. For the worker health and hygiene section of the general questions, I need to train my employees on sanitation and hygiene practices. So I have an SOP on how am I going to conduct the training. I have here some recommendation of trainings. If you don't do one, you can just like cross it or delete it in your SOP. And that's what I mean by adaptation. And the SOP is simple in a very simple format. Most of the SOPs are 1 page, no more than 2 pages. There are a couple that you need a little bit more room. But again, if you have some practices that are not appropriate or you don't follow at your farm, you need to get rid of them. And you need to type whatever you do in your farm that it's not in the SOP. So for this question of the audit, you're gonna need SOP 16 and record number 14. Record number 14 is the employee training procedure and the training log. I love that picture. Employees and visitors are following good hygiene and sanitation practices. Employees who handle or package produce are washing their hands before beginning or returning to work. There's no SOP needing here. Why is that? Because the auditor is going to verify this visually. And how he does this? He's there with a checklist and he's just gonna be looking at your farm, looking at your packing house, making sure that if there's a break, people go and wash their hands. And that they are like, that they can come clean to work. Readily understandable signs are posted to instruct employees to wash their hands before beginning or returning to work. You don't need a record for that. You need hand washing reminders. So the auditor is probably gonna go to the restroom and you need to have a sign that says, all employees must wash hands before returning to work. That's what this question means. And this gets assessed through a visual verification. It's a visual question. How is he gonna find out if the restrooms are clean? He's gonna go there and open the door of the restroom. He's gonna check that there's soap. He's gonna check that there's hand washing water. Bathroom or restroom cleaning. That's question G10. The audit calls for a record. So record number 3 is going to check you. It's going to help you to assure that restrooms are clean. And then these are a lot of questions. So you might want to get rid of a few questions here. And then adapt this to your needs. But it's less than 1 piece of paper. It's a very simple checklist. And this checklist, it's good for a whole week. You need to have a policy about smoking and eating only at the designated places. And the worker with diarrheal disease or sick workers, they shouldn't be handling fresh produce. You need to have a written policy. And that would be SOP number 3 again. Again, it doesn't tell you that you need to have a lunchroom. It tells you that workers shouldn't be eating that they should be eating in designated areas. And I can tell you how the mushroom people deal with this when they were implementing an USDA-GAP program. They have like a breezeway, and if they were picking on this side, the employees ate on this side of the building. And then after they were done, someone was in charge of making sure that no food was left there. And then when they were picking on this side, they were eating on this side of the breezeway. So those little things can be implemented in your farms. It's not that you need to build a lunchroom. In Arizona or in California, they eat on the edge of the field where the produce has been harvested. And it's not that they have like some companies, they have like a portable like chairs and tables, and that's the lunchroom. So what's the key condition here? That the area is separate from where the produce is handled. And this is also really important for the people who work or do extension work. This is a very important message to convey the workers. I mean, to convey to the grower. Some growers are scared of implementing food safety practices because they hear that, for instance, they need to build a lunchroom. That's not true. For certain audits, you do need a lunchroom, but for some others, you don't need a lunchroom. What's the key condition here? Separate. Some other growers are scared of food safety because they have heard that they need to build a fence around the farm. That's not true. You will build a fence if there's a risk of animal intrusion where you're growing. I mean, under certain conditions, even depending on the type of product that you have. Again, this is on SOP 3, G13, and G14. What happens when when the produce gets in contact with bodily fluids or with blood? And that's covered on SOP number 3, which is the SOP for personal health and hygiene, hand washing, and toilet facilities. So all these questions get addressed in the program with SOP number 3. Another one, G15. Handling application of chemical products. They need to be licensed. That gets covered on SOP number 4. And this is on the SOP that talks about handling application of chemical products. And you have the different like sentences here and the things that you should do in case of a spill and a leak, that all the product is labeled, where the product it's stored. Again, if some of the things, if there's some stuff here that you don't do, you can just like delete it because this was created in a Word format. Any questions or comments? Questions? Catherine, Billy, any questions, comments? Anyone else?
It's certainly a lot of information to take in and to think about. My question would be, we talked about the general farm questions and having an SOP to make sure that your employees are trained. I would imagine that, some of the growers that we're working with and supporting, might need to do. Here's a question about how the audits take place, because I certainly don't know. Can you keep operating your farm while the auditor is on site and, needing to check all of your compliance, or do you have to stop operations while you're being audited? And if you do keep operating, if they, for instance, see a farm worker or something that's out of compliance with the audit, you mentioned, some things might be, or I guess I'm asking a couple of different questions, but
what happens if they find something that shouldn't be happening at the farm?
Yeah, what happens?
You just, depending on what that is, but something you just let me put it in very simple, like you just get a no, you don't get those points. You get those points deducted. Unless there's a situation that puts like in risk the product that might lead to an unsatisfactory condition. Like in some audits, that's an automatic failure. But for that to happen, oh boy, means that, you should prepare for the audits. Our sister company, it's called Food Safety CTS Auditing Services. And I don't talk to them much to prevent like conflict of interest. but when they see something that shouldn't be there, and we do the harmonized gap, they just deduct the points and explain what happened there. And the auditee gets that in our report. And again, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. And as you keep saying, it's going to be specific to your operation. You have to customize and know your circumstances and your risks. So that makes sense to me. And just want to echo Sergio, you know, don't be shy to ask questions, and pop in at any time. You can drop them in the chat. You can turn on your mic. Yeah.
Sure. Let me tell you a story. When I was like starting with this, he was a very small grower, like mushroom grower. And then the mushroom industry created this program called Mushroom Good Agricultural Practices, which is based on a lot of this. Like, but the mushrooms are growing a unique way. And I remember I get a call and like, Sergio, I know that you guys growed and did the pilot of this. Can you help me implement this? Sure. So I found that out, that a lot of the things that are in that audit, I already make them, or I already do them at the farm. That's another a really important message that we need to convey to the grower. That a lot of these, it's already been done at the farm, but it's not documented. And that's where they need a little bit of help. So I remember, okay, Sergio, how about lunch? Sure. And I say, do you have a binder? Do you have some paperwork like basic that you found that you found that you have like during the training? And I'm laughing because I can still see his face. Oh, sure. And then, okay, we did the lunch, we went to the farm. And then like, where's your paperwork? Oh, come here to the back of his truck. He pulled the seat and then he started like pulling papers. And I was like, yo. So let's see this. And then I had to go back and explain that we need to get things organized. And he was like, yes, because if the auditor comes and he sees this, as soon as she steps here, he's gonna say, get out of here. You call me when you're ready. So we need to prepare. Is that right? Yes. So we work maybe 2 to 3 months on getting some of the paperwork done, getting some customization of the program done. And he passed the audit with flying colors. The aha moment was when he realized that a lot of the things that are in the audit were already happening at the farm. That's when the grower gets the aha moment. When you are doing extension work and you are able to convey that message, the grower like starts like, how would I say it? The grower starts not having fear to this. And what happens, like, that's a very valid question. What happens if the auditor sees like a practice that you're supposed to be doing here? Well, you just get the points deducted, fix it, and good to go. This is about having a plan. If my plan says that I need to do this and I'm not doing it, well, do what your plan says. There's a golden rule in writing an SOP. Do what you write what you do. Keep it simple. Use the KEYS approach. Keep it simple. So those are kind of some of reflections that I have on this, because I know it can be, you can feel scared or threatened by having a GAP audit. Yes. Yes, Dakota. Yes, that's exactly the message that I'm also trying to convey. She wrote in the chat, I think growers have automatic negative reaction to the word audits. But like just you said, many growers are already doing many of these things. They just don't document it. It's hard to get growers into the record keeping mindset. And I remember that small grower put an example to the big growers who were working on having an audit. He got it done. He pulled it that in like 3 months. We had to work a lot with his supervisor. Sometimes the grower is the supervisor, is the farm owner. In this case, he had a right hand, and he worked and he got it done. But he lost that like fear to the word audits. And again, just realize that a lot of the things that are written here are already happening at the farm. How about a break? I've been speaking for 1 hour. We've been speaking for 1 hour and 35 minutes. What's a good break, Catherine?
Sorry. How about 2:15? Is that enough time? Too much time?
Sure. We'll be back at 12:05, 1:15, 2:15. Okay, it can be. Yes. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.
10-minute break, everyone. Thanks.
Okay, just to get you going back to your question, Billy. Here are the conditions under which an automatic unsatisfactory will be assessed. An immediate food safety risk is present when produce is grown, processed, packed, or held under conditions that promote or cause the produce to become contaminated. There are, like, if you're doing something that it's like a potential risk to the produce and that it will cause a problem, that would be an unsatisfactory. The presence or evidence of rodents, an excessive amount of insects or other pests in the produce during packing, processing, or storage of produce. Observation of employee practices that have jeopardized or might jeopardize the safety of the produce. Think about this. If you have 10 employees and you see 5 of them going to the restroom not washing hands, that might be an example of this. But that's not likely to happen if you have worked on implementing your practices. Falsification of records, it's another one. Records should be created at the moment of performing the activity, not in advance, and not like filling records that from last month. Another thing, answering no to questions P1 or P2, and that's having a food safety plan in place and designate a person who is in charge of the plan. Another thing that it's important, just have you guys has returned to the discussion of the slides before we do that. Another thing that I always like to say, we need to speak the growers' language. We need to speak the growers of our audience. And here I'm not talking about English, Spanish, or whatever other language you might have in your area. We need to speak their language. Like, there's a stuff that it's quite a bit complicated in the audits. Like, what is a soil amendment? What is an untreated soil amendment? That's a big word. That's raw manure. I mean, we need to learn how to communicate with the workers speaking the language, with the growers and the workers speaking the language that they speak. And by that, I mean, like, simple terms. Use simple terms. Okay, let's go back to to the farm. So if you're a farm, you need to do the farm review plus some general questions. The general questions are the ones that we already covered and reviewed, and then part number 1 of the audit. Remember, to get a pass on the audit, you need to complete 80% of the points. And as you can tell, there's a value for each question of the audits. Some questions are worth 5 points, some questions are worth 10 points, and some other questions are worth 15 points. So there are a couple of questions there that ask you about the source of irrigation water. You need to specify that. How are crops irrigated? The risk is different if my water has contact with the product or if it doesn't have contact with the product. The risks is different if the water comes from a well or if I use surface water. So there are many different options that you need to specify, but in your food safety plan. A water quality assessment has been performed to determine the quality of the water used for irrigation purpose on the crops being applied. A water quality assessment has been performed to determine the quality of the water used for chemical application or fertigation method. And you can find record number 11. On record number 11 is the document for doing an assessment of the water. If you can see here, you have your water sources, the water use, the irrigation, contamination of water sources, water corrective actions. If necessary, steps are taken to protect irrigation water from potential direct and non-point source contamination. Like for instance, some farms, this is a reservoir. It's a big reservoir. Some farms build a fence to protect the reservoir. Some others have this type of tanks. Some others just cover the reservoir. But let me ask you a question. Does the audit tell you that you need to do this? No. It says, if necessary, steps are taken to protect irrigation water from potential direct and non-point source contamination. You are going to determine that based on risk. Sewage treatment. The farm sewage treatment system, before I move on. Give me 1 second here. Before I get asked this question, there's not really, oh, you're not looking at this, sorry. Because I know this question is coming. How often I need to test the water? So before we get into that, there's not really a national irrigation water standards setting the minimum microbial levels allowable for irrigation water. The produce safety rule contains standards for post-harvest water. But how often? the USDA-GAP GHP audit program sets the following testing frequency, depending if you have municipal water, well water, or surface water. That's the guideline in this audit for testing frequency. And for the criteria, well, there's not an irrigation water standard, but there are many commodity specific guidelines, such as the Arizona and California Leafy Greens Marketing Agreement, or the food safety standard for the tomato supply chain. They have the Mushroom Good Agricultural Practices Program also has or sets a standard. For post-harvest water applications, the USDA-GAP program requires the water use meet microbial requirements of the US EPA drinking water standard. Any post-harvest water use which doesn't meet this standard will result in an automatic and satisfactory assessment on the audit. And that is absence of total and fecal coliforms. Why is the where are you guys? Oh, you're here. Why is the post-harvest standard stricter than the irrigation standard? What's my favorite word in food safety? Risk. Risk. If you are washing your produce with water that is contaminated, you are going to be inoculating your produce. So they want you to wash your produce with water that has adequate sanitary quality. And for the other, for the irrigation, yes, that's a good question, Carol. Carol asked a question, water is being tested for microbial activity only? Yes. Let me tell you a story. I love stories. And I'm going back to the mushroom industry. You know, some companies, they have barracks where the workers live, some farms. And they need to provide like water to employees. And at this company, they were testing the water for microbial activity, but also other chemical parameters. And the water was a bit high on nitrates. So that water couldn't be used in the barracks for drinking. It was good from a microbial point of view, but not good for drinking from a chemical perspective. So the water in that well was also being used for irrigating mushrooms. And then suddenly one auditor from a certification body, not this type of audit, it was just, they already have this type of audit, the basic audit, they were going, he said, but this water is high in nitrates. So that's not good for like irrigating mushrooms. What if the mushrooms uptake that? And that was something that we just do not know. So Penn State did a study where they irrigated mushrooms with water with above the limit levels of this chemical compound. And they found that there was no uptake. So there was no risk. So the message that I'm trying to convey is that when we are implementing a program, all my programs need to be science-based, because I cannot imagine everyone testing for a couple of chemicals, which will make the testing more costly. And there's no evidence, scientific evidence, that the product will uptake that chemical from the water. Does that make sense? I can give you another example on chemical uptaking. Cadmium, spinach. Oh boy, cannot uptake cadmium from the soil. So in California, and it's funny because when you're closer to the coast, the soil it's higher in cadmium, or maybe higher in cadmium. So what they do is, if you know that cadmium might be present in your soil, you do test the soil for cadmium, and they have a threshold for that. And if it's above the limit, you don't grow spinach there. You grow something else which wouldn't uptake. How do you get to that conclusion instead of asking testing of soil left and right, which will be an expense? You look at the risk, you set up a practice, but that risk is based on science. See, I love stories. I found those two stories of application of science really fascinating. That's yes. The short answer is yes, Catherine. Does the uptake vary from different kinds of produce? Yes, not only the kind of produce, the type of elements as well. And there are a lot of unknowns on this still.
Sergio, if we
Yes.
use a fertilizer injector in our irrigation system, is that just covered under the fertilizers and application section? This is just talking about the source of the water.
The source of the water. Okay, can you ask the question? What would be the question?
If there are any food safety risks from using a fertilizer injector into your irrigation system, is that covered under a different section of the audit, or would that be in this water section?
Are you talking about the water that you use for injecting the fertilizer, or the fertilizer into the water?
Fertilizer into the water.
There's a section about chemicals use. Also, the audit doesn't say treat the water. You need to do an assessment, and you're going to decide what to do. Again, there are only 3 types of sources where you can get water. Your water might be municipal water, might be groundwater, which would be a well, or the third one would be surface water from a canal, from a river. So depending where you live is the type of water that you use. And then let's add something else to the equation. What type of irrigation method do you use? Do you use sprinklers, aerial? Does the water touch the produce? Is it drip irrigation? What type of produce do you have? Do you have, I was gonna say, do you have mangoes? But there's no mangoes in Kentucky. Do you have like berries, strawberries, and do drip irrigation, and the water doesn't touch the produce? Or do you grow lettuces? Oh, I can do one with tree fruit, apples, now that we're filming in Pennsylvania for the apple industry at this time, like as we speak. So what kind of water do you have in the farm? Well water? And then do you do drip irrigation or micro aspersion? Does the water contact the fruits? Maybe in the application. Do you treat the water that you use in those applications? Or you know the quality of the water and no need to do a water treatment? So there are a lot of questions that we need to ask to assess the risk of the water. So it's not just about testing left and right. Because there's one thing for sure, we need the water. I need to be aware of the risks. Like for instance, the produce safety rule has a definition of agricultural water. And it's the water that it's likely to touch the produce or the, it's called the harvestable part of the fruit, or the produce, or the food contact surfaces. You might not have agricultural water in your farm. So a lot of the requirements in that section of the rule wouldn't apply to you. So we need to do a thorough assessment to see what are my risks and what are my mitigation strategies. And that goes above and beyond what we're covering here in the audits or in this program. That might be another like one of these workshops on assessing risk of the water, because it's something that would become a way of contaminating my produce. And it's a challenge to do the water assessments. So let's go to sewage treatment. The farm sewage treatment system or septic system is functioning properly, and there's no evidence of leaking or runoff. There's no municipal commercial sewage treatment facility or waste material landfill adjacent to the farm. Are you guys hearing background noise? No? Okay. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's move on to into the other section. Animals, wildlife, and livestock. And that's manure stored near or adjacent to crop production areas is contained to prevent contamination of crops. Let me put this in very simple words. If you have animals and then you have manure, if you have these guys here, you're going to have a lot of these. Do you guys agree? I mean, and depending how many of these you have, you're going to have a whole lot of this. So what this question is telling you, you need to do something. You need to do something in here so this doesn't contaminate your produce. And how do you do that? Just do a risk assessment. Just go there, look, and think about a way on where you're going to store your manure. I remember a few years ago going into an avocado farm, and then some manure was delivered, and there was already fruit on the trees. And the manure, suppose that this is the farm without the trees, like here, the manure was stored right here in the middle of the farm. What happens if there's wind that day? That manure is gonna fly, and it has the potential of contaminating the produce, the avocados on the trees. So make sure that you think in advance where you're gonna store your manure. Measures are taken to restrict access of livestock to the source or delivery system of crop irrigation water. When we think about animals and animals in the farms, we think that they shouldn't be there in the farm. You're always going to have animals in the farm. It's really difficult to not have animals in the farm. You're going to have all different sorts of, think about it. You're going to have birds. It's agriculture, come on. So we have some mitigation measures for animals, such as if you see that animals might get into your farm, you might assess the crops to make sure that they didn't contaminate your crop. But when we talk about animals on the farm, we need to be thinking about the water too. Not only about the products, not only about the produce. The animals can also contaminate the water that we use. Think about this. I mean, does this happen in agriculture? Absolutely, yes. I remember a story about 2 years ago, somewhere in the United States, about 120 sheep, or 100 and some sheep, I don't even remember the number, were free. And then they went right into an irrigation canal, one after the other. So we need to be aware of animals, not only with the produce, but also with the water sources. Crop production areas are monitored for the presence or signs of wild or domestic animals entering the land. Again, you cannot have zero risk of animal intrusion. However, as far as I know, and I'm understanding here, that you need to inspect your crops to make sure that the animals didn't contaminate your produce. And if they did contaminate the produce, you need to do something. Maybe a buffer zone. Maybe don't harvest that like section of your land or farm. The audit doesn't tell you exactly how you're gonna get things done, but it tells you that you gotta do something. And then for these questions, we have record number 12, pre-harvest and animal activity assessment. Again, if there's stuff here that you don't do, or that this is a little bit too much for you, you can just get rid of some of the questions. Any questions? This record here, it's a double purpose because it helps you in several sections of the audit. Because you look at animals at the farm, but it's also a pre-harvest evaluation or a pre-harvest assessment. Like looking at the different things, like boxes, like glass, that the area is clean. Let's move on to animal-based soil amendments and municipal biosolids. Untreated, here we have three options. Untreated or incompletely treated animal-based soil amendments, or a combination of untreated and treated animal-based soil amendments are used. That means when you have soil amendments of animal origin, like something that it's mixed with like manure, horse manure, chicken manure, cow manure, blood, something that it's animal origin that hasn't been treated or incompletely treated for eliminating pathogens. And I'm not going to get it into the produce safety rule definition of treated. The option B is only treated or composted animal-based soil amendments. Treated municipal biosolids are used as soil amendments. So if you have biological soil amendments of animal origin that have been treated to reduce pathogens in it, you're gonna go for option B. So this is for raw manure, or when you mix like raw manure with something else that has been treated. It's still untreated. And then option B is the one that has been completely treated or treated, animal-based soil amendments. And option 3, Sorry. And option 3 is when you don't use any soil amendments of animal origin. So if you do compost, but it doesn't have any raw manure, anything from animal origin, this would be your option. The second one is when you have something, animal-based soil amendments, that has been completely treated to reduce pathogens. And option A is untreated, like straight from the cow, or partially treated, that you do a little bit of composting and then throw it to the field. So there are some requirements. So depending on this side, on this part of the audit, depending on where you are, depending on what you use, are the questions that you need to answer. Don't answer. One thing that the guidelines tell you is that if you use this, do not answer these questions. Just answer the questions for option C. It's the same the other way around. If you have this, do not answer this. But if you have this, do not answer this. So the first set of questions are for untreated animal-based soil amendments. When untreated animal-based soil amendments are applied, it is incorporated at least 2 weeks prior to planting and a minimum of 120 days prior to harvest. Untreated animal-based soil amendments are not used on commodities that are harvested within 120 days of planting. And then we created, you need a record for this. We created record number 10, which is application of soil amendments record. The date that you applied, type of amendment, application method, product to which the soil amendment is applied, section of your form, application time, dose, and signature of the person responsible. Again, if you're a small farm, you might not need a section area. You might get rid of some columns. Customization. These are just model records.
Sergio, I can give a personal example here, and this may or may not be the case depending, again, on your individual farm and the state that you're operating in. But in Maryland, all farms of any size are covered by a soil amendment law where we have to record it and report it every year. So it's a good example of we're already doing that for another compliance thing that we're required to do. So it would be really easy to translate that into our food safety plan because we're already keeping those records. So looking for those opportunities where you might already be doing the practice, or you might already have a version of the record and just translating it easily into your food safety work.
And let me add something to that we haven't mentioned here. You say we already have a record for this. It's not that you need to use these records for the audits, like these records for the audits. If you have another record that works, just use that one. Period. It's not that you gotta use this and do double work. And it is really important. The program needs to be adapted to what you have. So that was a great comment. So if you're already doing stuff, try to incorporate what you're already doing into this. So here's question 116. If both untreated and treated animal-based soil amendments are used, the treated animal-based soil amendment is properly treated, composted, or exposed to reduce the expected levels of pathogens. And for treated, we can learn from the produce safety rule. There are some parameters there for naming a treated, or what a treated biological soil amendment of animal origin is. It has been treated by a scientifically validated method to reduce pathogens such as Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli H7. I should say Listeria mono. And then there's another like combination of microorganisms that you can use to consider that process scientifically valid. Think about ways of storing animal-based soil amendments. Look at this. That helps you to minimize risks. It's totally up to you. Treated or composted animal-based soil amendments. Only treated or composted animal-based soil amendments and or treated biosolids are used as a soil amendments. And then we have record 10 and record 9. That can help you to record some of the parameters of the treatment. And record number 10, it's for the application of soil amendments. Here we have an SOP for answering treated or composted animal-based soil amendments and or treated biosolids are properly treated, composted, or exposed to environmental conditions that would lower the expected level of pathogens. So here we have an SOP that corresponds to this section of the audit. This is a huge composting operation. We took this picture within the mushroom industry. Analysis reports available for treated or composted animal-based soil amendments or treated biosolids. You need to have a record showing a report for treated compost. And then when you don't use, you need to demonstrate that you don't use animal-based soil amendments. And you might have that on your SOP. I have another story. I love stories. Because also the mindset of some growers, this was it was like a humongous like farm, like this was in Peru. It was like a grape farm, but it relates to a small grower in Pennsylvania or in Maryland. The guys were really concerned. They have like, of course, they had like several, like tons of employees, but they were concerned about the compost that they were using and all the things that they needed to do for complying with a regulation, in this case, the product safety rule. And they were asking me what they needed to do for their compost, what kind of records, because they were saying, we just composted this. And then I asked, first of all, what's in it? And then they started like telling me the things that were on the compost. And then, is there any poop there? Raw manure, like horse manure, chicken manure, blood? And everything was like, no, nothing of animal origin. So it was an easy one. They were not covered, or they were not subject to that part of the rule. So so the message that I was trying to convey is that not because you hear the word compost, that means that you are going to have to comply with like all this. You need to make sure that they understand the recipe that they use in the compost. And if there's no animal-based soil amendments, you just answer that question and have it written in an SOP showing what you use. And why is that? The risk is way different, way different. Like a soil amendment can be something as simple as, like in the lettuce fields, when they are done, they get the tractor and then they flip the field, and then that's a soil amendment. With some tree crops, the leaves fall, and then they do the cutting of the trees, and that's a soil amendment, and none of the animal things apply to them. So it's really important that they know. Soils, a previous land risk use assessment has been performed. When a previous land use history indicates a possibility of contamination, preventive measures have been taken to mitigate the known risks, and soils have been tested for contaminants, and the land use is commensurate with test results. What was on that field before? Now, if X, Y, and Z was on my field, does that represent a risk? And you need to have that documented. And then for that, we have an SOP 08 and record number 11. Crop production areas that have been subject to flooding are tested for potential microbial hazards. You know, for FDA, if you got a flood or if you're flooded and the flooding waters touch the produce, that produce is considered to be adulterated and it cannot enter the market. So production areas that have been subject to flooding are tested for microbial hazards. And we have that on SOP 08 and record 11. This is a simple one that you just need to ask these questions to yourself and maybe others if you're leasing the land. And then use the record to demonstrate that you are taking that into account. Each production area is identified or coded to enable traceability in the event of a recall. And then we have an SOP that it's the traceability and recall program. Any questions or comments? I have a question for you. Do any of you do wholesale and distribution? Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next section. Thank you very much, Mary. Part 2, field harvest and field packing activities. You need to do general question plus section number 2. You might do general questions plus number 1 plus number 2. Field sanitation and hygiene. A documented pre-harvest assessment is made on the crop production areas. Risks and possible sources of crop contamination are noted and assessed. Sometimes we call the pre-harvest assessment a risk assessment or an environmental assessment. And what is a pre-harvest assessment? A pre-harvest assessment is nothing more than a visual observation of the field before harvesting. What is it? Just walk the field. Walk the field to make sure that there are no risks present and that you're okay to harvest the produce. As simple as that. Walk the field. So how can we convey this message to the grower, someone who is new? So instead of just telling people, now we're gonna harvest this product. No, you enter there first, walk the field, and you don't have to walk the entire field. It can be a good representation of your field. Looking for different risks. You say that all employees come clean to work, just like standing there looking at the employees coming to work. You're saying that your harvesting containers are clean and free of debris. Just look at them. You probably have them at a storage place. Just look at them, making sure that they are okay. And that's part of my environmental assessment or the visual inspection of the field. And we have SOP number 9 and record number 12. Field sanitation and hygiene. The restrooms, the number, condition, and placement of field sanitation units comply with applicable state and or federal regulations. And that means OSHA. Field sanitation units are located in a location that minimizes the potential risk for product contamination and are directly accessible for servicing. It's not the same to keep these restrooms clean than to service them. Service them meaning taking all the blue lagoon like out, and cleaning them means that they need to be clean. There's a rule of thumb. Have a restroom that I would use. And this can be the restroom in the house, or it can be the restroom in the barn, as long as it has all the supplies that you need. Our response plan in place is in place for the event of a major spill or leak of field sanitation unit or toilet facilities. And this is included on SOP number 3. Field harvesting and transportation. Another question that we have here is about harvesting containers. And I already talked about that. Things that come in direct contact with the produce are clean. Oops. And sanitized on a scheduled basis and keep as clean as practicable. It doesn't tell you that you gotta clean everything every day or every 3 hours. It tells you as clean as practicable. You, and only you are going to determine how often you should clean the harvesting and the harvesting containers and the hauling vehicles. It's totally up to you. Again, all hand harvesting equipment and implements are kept as clean as practical and are disinfected on a scheduled basis. For instance, what some growers do, they have buckets with sanitizer to constantly sanitize the knives. Here's a sanitation record and here's a sanitation procedure. That's SOP number 6 and record number 8. Field harvesting and transportation. Another question that we have is that damaged containers are properly repaired or disposed of. How can you know if you have damaged containers? Inspecting them. When do you inspect them? When do you inspect them? When doing your pre-harvest assessment. What happens if I have a small packing house or I have something where there's glass and broken glass? If it breaks, may become a source of contamination. Well, you need to have a standard operating procedures that includes the measures that you're gonna take in case that there's a glass or plastic breakage and that your produce or product gets contaminated. And this happens. I know about a company that they grow stuff and that they have lights inside the greenhouses. And one day a lamp, a glass, a light fixture broke. And they didn't, no one say anything. And they found that out the next day. The next day was already too late because the product had already left the farm and was with the retailer. So they had to pay a fine and they had to dispose, like, I think it was 10,000 pounds of product just for not having a glass and brittle plastic program. in place. And it's as simple as inspect that everything is either Teflon coated, are your light bulbs, or that the big lamps are like covered, that they have a cover. There's a standard operating procedures or instructions on what measures should be taken in the case of product contaminations by chemical, petroleum, pesticides, or other contaminating factors. And we have all of that on SOP number 4. Again, for some physical contaminants, we have a question on section 213. To prevent that physical objects become a source of contamination. When you have a machine that helps you, like a harvesting machine, if you don't have that harvesting machine, this would be a non-applicable. This is something that you always find at a farm. A harvesting tote or a harvesting container always gets used as a toolbox or for storing labels. So you have a policy for that, storage and handling of product containers. Water applied to harvested product meets the microbial standards for drinking water. This is not for irrigation. This would be the water in post-harvest. And there are many uses of post-harvest water in a farm. It can be for washing hands. It can be for cleaning and sanitizing equipment. It can be for washing products. So that water must meet the microbial standards for drinking water. Why? Remember my favorite word in food safety, risk. Efforts have been made to remove excessive dirt and mud from product and or containers during harvests. In other words, the audit asks you to clean your containers and also that have a transportation equipment in good repair. And there's no documents here because this is a visual. There's a policy in place for moving product from the field to the storage areas or packing houses. How are you going to prevent that the product gets contaminated during transportation? In ranch or feed pack operations, only new or sanitized containers are used for packing the product. No reuse of certain containers. Packing materials used in a ranch or field pack operations are properly stored and protected from contamination. You're going to determine how to protect your packing materials. And then all the product that it's moving, that it's leaving your ranch must be identified so you can implement your traceability plan. And as I say, we already have a traceability and recall SOP, and then we have a traceability record that can help you to trace product back or to conduct a mock recall. Any questions? Questions, comments? How are we doing? We're getting there. The instructor needs a restroom break. So let's be back at 1:15, correct?
Sounds good.
Or 1:20, let's say 1:20.
10-minute break, everyone.
In Kentucky. Oh, okay. What I'm gonna say that again. So what kind of produce is grown in Kentucky? Like the stakeholders, your program users.
Anyone from Kentucky? Oh, there we go. Thanks, Bethany.
Squashes, greens, etc. Okay. And what water is being used there? Is it like surface water or well water? Or both? Yeah, like all three types. Okay. So let's move on to part 3. And after this one, everything is more of the same and the same and the same. Oh, where are you guys? After this, everyone is more of the same. Because in general questions, they need to have general question sections. And then they need to do section 3. But if you do repacking in the distribution or warehousing or cooler, we already covered that in this section. So let's take a look at the questions from part 3 of the packing house. You can see my screen. Product is delivered from the field, which is held in a staging area prior to packing or processing is protected from possible contamination. Prior to packing, product is properly stored and or handled in order to reduce possible contamination. That means set up a storage area where the products might not get contaminated. That's the way that this reads, and this is a visual question. Washing and packing line. Source water used in the packing operation meets the microbial standards for drinking water. Why is that? Because this is post-harvest, and this is a stricter requirement than the one for irrigation, or a stricter criteria. Remember, another thing that it's really important to understand is that when you use water, anytime that the water may touch the produce or the food contact surface, might be an opportunity for a contaminator or for cross-contaminating the produce or the food contact surface. So you need to make sure that the water complies or meets the microbial standards for drinking water. And for that, we have SOP number 5. SOP number 5. And a record where you can consolidate the lab analysis. If applicable, the temperature of processing water using dump tanks, flumes is monitored and it's kept at temperatures appropriate for the crop. Some produce pose a risk of infiltration. That means that if there's a differential in the washing tank, in the temperature of the water in the washing tank and the product may suck the water to the inside of the fruit or vegetable. Not all the products are prone to infiltration. Tomatoes are one of them. Cantaloupes is another one. Papayas, mangoes, they are all prone to infiltration. The key is to monitor the temperature of the water and the temperature of the product to prevent infiltration, but also to make sure that the water has an adequate sanitary quality. Processing water is sufficiently treated to reduce microbial contamination. We have SOP number 5, which is water usage and control. And then we have a log for measuring the sanitizer concentration in the water. Here, if you have a washing tank, you must treat the water. You must treat the water with an antimicrobial agent. And there are plenty of resources for choosing the right antimicrobial agent. Another thing that it's important for growers to understand is that when you're adding sanitizer to the water, it's for preventing cross-contamination from the water and not for sanitizing the fruits. When you adding sanitizer to the water, you are sanitizing the water, not trying to sanitize the fruits. And I use an analogy for this to explain this to the growers. It's like during the summer, we all like going to the pool, or a lot of us like going to the pools, getting to the pool, and the water that is used in recreation, it has some chlorine, correct? What is the main purpose of that chlorine? To sanitize the people or to sanitize the water so it doesn't become a source of contamination? Sanitize the water. It's exactly the same here. You add sanitizer to the water to prevent that the water becomes a source of contamination. And there are a couple of papers out there that explain how the microbes can get from the fruit to the water and then to another fruit. They can spread through the water. Processing water is sufficiently treated to reduce microbial contamination. Okay. Let's go to the next question here. Water contact surfaces such as dump tanks, flumes, wash tanks, and hydro coolers are cleaned or sanitized on a scheduled basis. Not because it's water, that doesn't mean that you don't have to clean the tank. You need to clean the water contact surfaces. You need to monitor the water treatment and the exposure time, and that this is appropriate to the food product. And there are many different ways for doing this. Food contact surfaces are in good condition, clean and or sanitized prior to use, and cleaning logs are maintained. We might need to teach the grower what is a food contact surface. And a food contact surface is any surface that touches the produce within the packing facility. And those surfaces must be kept clean and sanitized to prevent cross-contamination. Product flow zones are protected from sources of contamination. And there are many different ways of doing this. The water used for cooling and or making ice meets the microbial standard for drinking water. And this is also consistent with the produce safety rule. Any ice used for cooling produce is manufactured, transported, and stored under sanitary conditions. Packing house worker health and hygiene. The employee facilities are clean and located away from the packing area. And it doesn't have to be a fancy area. When there's a written policy regarding the use of hairnets, beer nets in the production area, it is being followed by employees and visitors. Remember the basic rule about writing an SOP or having SOPs. Write what you do what you write. It's not asking you to have hairnets. I've seen too many packing houses that they don't use hairnets. It says when there is a written policy. So if you have a written policy requesting hairnets, so everyone needs to use hairnets. By the way, I don't like hairnets, but that's me. It's good for some products, but for some others. And when there's a written policy regarding the wearing of jewelry in the production area, it is being followed by all employees and visitors. And again, if you write something, you need to stick to that. If the auditor is gonna go and look at your SOP, that's why you need to customize it to match what you do in your facility. He's gonna look at your SOP, and then he's gonna go and look at the things that you do. Only food grade approved and labeled lubricants are used in the packing equipment machinery. Chemicals not approved for use on product are stored and segregated away from the packing area. The plant grounds are reasonably free of litter and debris. You don't have to be like that big to keep your area free of debris. The plant grounds are reasonably free of standing water. Outside garbage receptacles and dumpsters are closed or are located away from the packing facility entrances, and the area around such sites is reasonably clean. Packing facilities are enclosed. The packing facility interior is clean and maintained in an orderly manner. Floor drains appear to be free of obstructions. The pipes, ducts, and fans that are over food handling operations are clean. Glass materials of product flow zones are contained in case of breakage. Possible wastewater spillage is prevented from contaminating any food handling areas by barriers, drains, or a sufficient distance.
Sergio, just a quick question. On
Yes.
the standard of the packing facility being enclosed, I'll just, again, giving my own personal example, we work in a barn, and it has 3 enclosed walls and like a big bay door to load produce in. Does that count as enclosed, or will we have to fully enclose the space and have like a door or something?
I'm gonna be really honest with you. I need to find out, I don't know, because I need to find out more about this. What do they mean by enclosed? Because when I was looking at this, I was thinking about bananas. Like there's plenty of places, like I've been to places like, not in the US, but where bananas are grown and packed, and it's not enclosed, the packing house. For the produce safety rule, it shouldn't be enclosed. So I need to find out more, and I can reach out to all of you with a definite answer. What do they mean by enclosed? I don't want to say yes or no. So in other words, I'm not sure. I need to check.
Sounds good.
And I hope you guys are transporting yourselves to the places where you conduct business, like the farm. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of this is, I have it. He has it, but he doesn't document this. Only new or sanitized containers are used for packing product. This is a good one. Only new, if it's one that it's gonna leave the facility, like when you do, like, let's say clamshells or boxes, or sanitized containers are used for packing product. If you have RPCs, reusable plastic containers, they should be clean and sanitized, or reasonably clean and sanitized. And here you have an SOP for storage and handling produce containers. Pallets and containers are clean and in good condition. Just clean and in good condition. Another thing that you need to think about in your farm, if you have a couple of pallets, 3, 4 pallets, where you always store your baskets, you need to make sure that you look for dirt underneath those pallets. Because sometimes we don't move them. I was at a facility a couple of weeks ago, and this wasn't produce. but they didn't have anything on the floor. The storage looked pristine, and it was like end product like a storage. It looked pristine, very nice. But then we started digging, and they have everything on pallets, but you could tell that there were like cobwebs and product debris underneath the pallets because the pallets were not in good condition. They are not moved, and the company didn't clean every now and then underneath the pallets. Packing containers are properly stored and protected from contamination, birds, rodents, and other pests. Let me give you a trick on how to convince the growers, or how they can figure out, not to convince, how to convey this message to the growers. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do you think there's maybe $100 here worth of boxes? If they are a buck or a couple of bucks a piece, a pop, or 50 cents, you can easily have a few $100s stored in your farm. Do you guys agree? So take care of them. Make sure that they are properly stored and protected from contamination. Don't store them outside. What happens if it rains? They are not going to be usable. I remember, and I'm going back to my mushroom days. Oh, I have some boxes, and we went to this room, and the guy had maybe $2,000 to $3,000 worth of boxes that were not in a very good shape, that he couldn't reuse. He had a mess in this little room. So he cleaned up that room. He organized the way that he put some controls for the boxes, and his boxes were in good shape from now and then, from that day and then. It was like money for the small grower. Pest control. Measures are taken to exclude animals and pests from packing and storage facilities. There's an established pest control program for this facility, and there should be service reports. We have an SOP here. Okay. There are two ways of doing this, and maybe you can read this here, internally or by an external company. So you can do your own pest control program if you're a small packing house. The standard or the audit, the verification, doesn't call you or doesn't call for hiring a contractor for doing this. It can be you, or it can be an external contractor. But there's gotta be service report, and there's gotta be a written program. So if you're gonna do it, you need to specify how often you're gonna be reviewing your like bait stations and your glue trap stations. Remember, no bait stations, no active bait stations like with rodenticide should be inside the facility. Here's more on pest controls. And then traceability. You need to have oh, before I move, how can you make sure that the building is in good condition and that there are no like room for or like places for the pests to hide or get into my building? Doing an inspection. And as a grower, don't try to do 10 things at a time. Just do 1 or 2. Focus on 1 or 2. Let's say, okay, I'm gonna do a building inspection, and I'm gonna focus on these 2 or 3 things. And then I'm gonna give myself 1 or 2 months to fix that. Next thing you know, he's gonna be taking care of a lot of different things. For the traceability program, the packing house must have records for recording the source of incoming product and the destination of outgoing product. That allows them to enable traceability. One up, one down. Any questions on this? We're getting there. So we already covered the packing house. Now we're gonna go to storage and transportation. And this is more of the same. You need to do the general questions and then the storage and transportation section. In this one, you don't need a lot of records. A lot of this is visual. You need some records. The storage facility is clean and maintained in an orderly manner. Look at this. This is a very simple facility. It's keep clean and organized. Bulk storage facilities are inspected for foreign material prior to use, and records are maintained. So here's the warehouse inspection log. This is record 15, and this is unique for this type of operation. Storage rooms, buildings, and/or facilities are maintained and sufficiently sealed or isolated and are protected from external contamination. We're talking about the warehouse here. Storage grounds are reasonably free of litter and debris. Floors are reasonably free of standing water. Look at this. And then there's this drain. Possible wastewater spillage is prevented from contaminated any food handling area, but barriers, drains, or sufficient distance. This SOP was designed or includes the policy describing procedures, specifying handling and disposition of finished product, which is opened, spilled, or comes in contact with the floor. So in this one, you have a policy. What happens if this falls? If a box of product falls on the floor, and then you have product all over the floor, all over the ground. So you need to have a policy on what you're gonna do with this product, which you're gonna send it to the dumpster for animal feed or for packing. Containers are properly stored and sufficiently sealed to be protected from contamination. Look at how this is nicely done. The same for pallets, pallet boxes, tote bags, portable bins. They should be clean and in good condition. Again, if you need to store produce outside, this is covered and protected from contamination. Non-food grade substances should be stored in close proximity to the products. So have the unique storage areas for this type of non-food grade substances. Mechanical equipment used during storage process is clean and maintained to prevent contamination of the product. How can you demonstrate that the mechanical equipment is clean? Well, you have a sanitation record. And it's not that you gotta clean it every day. These might happen every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks, every month. Some things need to be cleaned every 3 months. Some stuff might need to be cleaned every 6 months. Pest controls, this is exactly the same as the one for packing facilities. Measures are taken to exclude animals and pests from storage facilities. In simple English, close the doors. Don't let them enter into the building. And then you need to have an established pest control program and have service reports. And again, interior walls, floors, and ceilings are well maintained and free of major cracks and crevices. Cracks and crevices may allow to product accumulation and water accumulation. And Listeria monocytogenes and all the species of Listeria love that, like water and food. The water used for cooling, humidity, and or making ice meets the microbial standards for drinking water. And this is the exact same standard as the one we just covered for the packing house. The same if you're making ice. You know, I was in a facility, in a very nice facility in Pennsylvania, and I just couldn't believe that they were receiving, I think it was broccolini from California. And the broccolini had ice. And that ice came all the way from California. And the type of boxes that they use for having like the product with the ice in it. What's important here? That the ice, that the ice was made with water that has an adequate sanitary quality for this purpose, and that the facilities or the machines that are used for making ice have been cleaned and sanitized. And we have a record for that and an SOP for that. The sanitation record is only one, and this can serve for all your operations. Climate control rooms are monitored for temperatures and logs are maintained. We have an SOP for that. That's on SOP 15, and this is record 16. The same for thermometer verification log. We have a record that help us to check the thermometers for accuracy and records. Temperature control equipment condensation doesn't come in contact with produce. If you have condensation that it's dripping from the units, these should not become in contact with the produce. This could be an automatic failure because we don't know if this water is contaminated or not. So this may lead, I'm not saying that it is. Why is that? There's a microorganism called Listeria that it's everywhere. None of the species of Listeria are pathogens, only Listeria monocytogenes. But the one thing about Listeria is that they like cold environments. And this could be, or this Listeria could be in this type of water or in this type of units. Refrigeration equipment and the humidifiers are cleaned on a scheduled basis. Ice product doesn't drip on pallets of produce stored below. And again, there's one thing that I like on all this. When we talk about cleaning and sanitizing, there's a concept that I like to tell the growers. There's old dirt and then there's new dirt. When you go to a farm, and it can be a very small farm, and then they tell you, we clean and sanitize the harvesting containers. And you can clearly see, or the food contact surfaces, you can clearly see a layer of dirt that has been there for a couple of months. That's all dirt. The new dirt, the new kind of a standing water, it's the water that gets accumulated through the course of the day, of the dirt that gets accumulated during the day. So we need to make sure that we clean and sanitize regularly to prevent accumulation of dirt, and then that dirt becomes a source of cross-contamination. Does that make sense? So you need to do a deep cleaning and then just maintain that. You do it once, you do clean and sanitize everything once or twice per year or every 3 months, depending on your facility. And then it's about keeping it up. Okay, transportation. prior to the loading process, conveyances are required to be clean in good physical condition, free from bad odors and from obvious dirt and debris. Produce items are not loaded with potentially contaminating products. And this is something you need to do a check. Just check the truck where you're gonna load your produce. And if it's dirt, you don't load it there. You clean it and sanitize and then load it. If you're a big like storage facility, you need to train the guys at the dock so they can come to you to let you know that the transportation truck is not or it's not in good condition. Company has a written policy for transporters for keeping the temperature at the specified range. Conveyances are loaded to minimize damage to products. And again, we have an SOP for that and a record for that. And this is exactly the same as the one for packing houses. These are lockers. They should be clean and located away from storage, shipping, and receiving areas. This is a nice one. Of course, it wouldn't work in the winter in Pennsylvania or Kentucky. It might work in New Mexico or California. Again, for personal hygiene, the written policy for jewelry and hairnets. If you have a policy, everyone should follow that policy. And you need to have records for traceability. You need to identify the source of the incoming product and the destination of the outgoing product. So the cooler, the storage is one back, one up. We have an SOP and we have a record. Wholesale distribution center and terminal warehouses. Optional preventive food defense procedures. Because this is a facility and they might need to be registered. All companies that supply fresh produce are required to have passed a third-party audit verification of GAP and or GHPs. And that's part of your traceability and recall program. So you need to get product, and this is a tough one. This is a tough one to comply. Receiving, conveyances are required to be clean, in good physical condition, and free from obvious debris, odors, dirt, when you are unloading them. We have an SOP for that, SOP 12, where there should be, that it's gonna be the policy for that question. That very same policy is going to help us to comply with question 6.3. Company doesn't accept produce items that are loaded with or are not protected from potentially contaminating products. If a commodity must be refrigerated, you need to monitor temperatures at receiving. And then we have a record for that. Remember, this is for wholesale distribution centers and terminal warehouses. You need to have a policy on what are you gonna do with the product when temperatures are not within your company's guidelines at the time of receiving. The facility is clean and maintained in an orderly manner. Refrigerated rooms are monitored for temperature logs, and logs are maintained. This is exactly the same as the last one. You need to have a record for the temperature in your coolers, in your coolers. Thermometers are verified or checked for accuracy, and records are available for review. Again, condensation. Refrigeration system condensation doesn't come in contact with produce. I love this picture. This practice doesn't cost money. Here's the unit. You start storing your produce like right here. So there's no, if there's dripping here, condensation, there's no dripping falling directly into the produce. Again, your refrigeration equipment should be clean on a scheduled basis. The audit doesn't tell you how often you are going to be in charge of doing your master cleaning schedule, having your calendar, and there you're going to decide how often you need to clean and sanitize your area or equipment. And what the frequency should be, you are going to determine that based on risk. This might, like a food contact surface, might need to be cleaned every day. Like the walls, maybe every 3 months. The doors, the ceiling, the light fixtures, the AC units. I don't know, you decide that. The same here for ice products. It shouldn't be dripping on pallets of produce stored below. Again, the water used for cooling or ice meets the microbial standards for drinking water. Again, this is the same. If you have a machine for making ice, this should be clean and sanitized on a scheduled basis. What happens if a box is open, spilled, or comes in contact of contamination? You should have a policy on what are you gonna do with that produce, which you are most likely going to dispose it. Temperature control. Okay, product flow zones are protected from sources of contamination. Glass material above product flow zones are contained in case of breakage. What means contained? They need to be covered or being Teflon coated. The grounds are reasonably free of litter and debris, free of standing water, reasonably free of standing water. Remember, there's a standing water that accumulates through the course of the day that you're constantly removing. And then there's water that looks like milk chocolate because it has been there for several days. That's a no-no. Remember that Listeria loves standing water. This section talks about outside garbage. Again, the facility is enclosed. This is a warehouse facility or terminal warehouse. Floor drains appear to be free of obstructions. This is the same. The pipes, the ducts, the fans, and ceilings in the facility are reasonably clean. And non-food grade substances are not stored in close proximity to the product. And a lot of these distribution center and terminal warehouses have programs in place. They tend to be pretty big. But this is a good starting program for the ones that do not have a food safety program in place. Pest control, you need to have a program and have measures in place to exclude animals or pests from the facility. You need to have service reports. Again, the pest control program can be done in-house or through an external contractor. For walls, floors, and ceilings, the standard says, or the audit verification or the verification checklist tells you that they need to be well maintained and free of major cracks and crevices. If you repack or recondition products, you need to answer another set of questions. Sometimes you get a load of tomatoes, and then you have a customer that only wants tomatoes from a certain quality. So you repack within your terminal warehouse or distribution center. So if you repack, you need to re-answer these questions. The repacking is going to happen in a certain section of your building. We have an SOP where you can specify that when that's written. Food contact surfaces are in good condition, clean and or sanitized prior to use, and cleaning logs are maintained. If you need to grade product because of a customer only wants like certain grade, you are doing repacking. So anything that touches your product must be in good condition, and you need to clean and sanitize prior to use, and you need to have records for that. If you use water in the repacking operations, they need to meet the microbial standards for drinking water. The water that you use for cleaning and sanitizing the machines, or if you use water during the process. If you use water during the process, like to wash products, the water must be sufficiently treated to reduce microbial contamination. And these parameters are the same as the ones that we have in the packing facility. This is for ice. Water used for chilling or to make ice meets the microbial standards for drinking water. And then we have a question about food grade. Lubricants are only used in this area of the facility. Only new or sanitized containers are used for product repacking. This is the same as in the packing house. The same for pallets. They need to be the pallets and other containers, they need to be clean and in good condition, and they need to be properly stored and protected from contamination. The employee facilities are clean and located away from repack and storage areas. Again, if you have a written policy regarding the use of hairnets or the wearing of jewelry, you must comply with that policy. But this is the key word, when there's a written policy. Shipping and transportation. Prior to the loading process, you need to make sure that conveyances are clean, in good physical condition, free from bad odors, and from obvious dirt and debris. How can you do that? Just look at the back of the truck. That would be more than enough. If something, if there's a potentially contaminated product there, you shouldn't be loading your produce. And you need to have that in a policy. Traceability. You need to have records for traceability, where you identify the source of the incoming product and the destination of the outgoing product. One back, one up. These products should be uniquely identified to enable traceability. We have one more to go. This is the preventive food defense procedure. I'm just gonna fly with this. This section is optional. And what do we have here? We have an SOP and we have an employee training procedure. We have a food defense plan. This section of the audit calls for a food defense plan and a person who takes care of the food defense plan, that oversees it. And you need to have food defense training. This might sound very complicated, but there are a couple of programs out there for teaching food defense that can help you if you decide to go this route. It's about controlling people and controlling the access to your facilities. Another thing that I was gonna say that I forgot. We have another project with the National Farmers Union, PSR 101. the Product Safety Rule 101. We are developing a training program so farms can train employees on their farms. So, and that's coming soon. Okay, here are the questions on the food defense. The questions are, a lot of the questions require for you to have some sort of documentation, but that document is your food defense plan. Employees must be trained on, if you see something, say something. Like that's the basic food defense awareness training employee need. The employees need to know who they contact if they see something. Like this guy over here. Visitors are required to check in and out when entering and leaving the facility. You need to have a visitor's log. All of this is about visitors. Incoming and outgoing employees and visitor vehicles to and from the site are subject to inspection. This audit calls for a decal issued by your facility on the vehicles. You cannot bring personal items into the handling and storage areas. The access of the staff is limited to the certain sections where they belong. And the management is always aware on who should be there. And all of this is in your food defense plan. A system of positive identification of employees has been established and it's enforced. It can be a simple ID. If an employee gets terminated, and if you issued an ID or an access card, you should collect that if the employee is terminated. For the facility, if you have a mailroom, this is located away from the packing and storage facilities. Computer access is restricted to a specific personnel. Not everyone has access to the computers and the information that is on the computer. And this is written in your food defense plan. And this is easily done through like passcodes and passwords. This is not really for a small grower, but it's part of the USDA-GAP and GHP audits. A system of traceability of computer transactions has been established. A minimum level of background checks has been established for all employees, and this is written on your food defense plan. You do routine security checks on your premises. When you see a sign of tampering, criminal, or terrorist activity. Perimeter facility is secured by fencing or other deterrent. Checklists are used to verify the security of doors, windows, and other points of entry. Safe facilities checklist. We also have a checklist for that. All keys to the establishment are accounted for. Who has a key to the building? The facility has an emergency lighting system, is enclosed. The vehicles that are not being in use are locked. Like these doors should be locked. These doors should be locked. These doors should be locked when not in use. Delivery schedules have been established and the uploading of incoming materials is supervised. This might seem a little bit too much, but remember, this is about protecting the product from intentional adulteration. And there have been stories of intentional adulteration. So you have some other policies included in your food defense plan, such as a policy for protecting deliveries. You have a program to inspect product returned to the facility for tampering. The company has identified individuals with at least one backup who are responsible for recalling the product. the company has performed a successful mock recall of the product to the facility. And this is on your traceability and recall. It's totally up to you if you want to have this section of the audit. Product imported from outside the United States is segregated from domestic product. This can be really tough for a large facility. Allergens handled by the facility are segregated from product to avoid cross-contamination. Only in the case allergens are handled. And we have a policy for that. But if you don't have an allergen, you can just eliminate that sentence from the SOP. Floor plans, product flow plans, and/or segregation charts are in a secure location. And you have registered with the FDA, and you have a registration number. Farms do not need to register with the FDA, only facilities. Okay, so I would strongly recommend you to visit the website. The food safety CTS dash. I don't know if we have it on the chat. I think, let me put it here on the chat. And then we will have a follow-up email. And then if you have a question or if you need support, either if you're a farmer or if you are supporting growers, farmers, do not hesitate to shoot us an email. We can help you out. This is part of the grant. I'm committed for a while. I don't know for how much time, but I'm committed to reply to emails. That's pretty straightforward for me and my team. We can always answer a question. So today, we cover the basic information of the USDA GAPs and GHP verification program. And I presented some of the model SOPs and records that we developed for helping growers to show compliance with this program. I really hope that you have enjoyed the training. And I don't know if you have any questions or final comments.
I just want to amplify what Sergio just said. We will definitely make sure and follow up with everyone that attended, link to all of these resources, the recording of this conversation, make sure that you have our contact information. If there's a follow-up question or a type of training or information that you want to see under this program, we're all ears. We're here to support all of you, farmers, groups supporting farmers, and we're really grateful to Sergio for his time and expertise today. That was really fascinating, and I certainly learned a lot. So thank you, everyone. And any other questions or comments from any of y'all?
Well, thank you very much. And you know where to find us, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you to the National Farmers Union for having me. And let's keep in touch.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.